Welcome back to Built by Educators, a Collab Ed podcast where we talk with the people working every day to support teachers, strengthen schools, and help teachers and students succeed. Today we are joined by Dr. Timothy Shampoe, a school administrator at the Clare House and Kelly Avenue School, who also works in treatment services and recruits foster parents through the Next Door Inc. Dr. Shampoe's work sits at a powerful intersection between education, child welfare, and community support. Through those experiences, he's developed a deep insight into trauma-informed teaching and how educators can better support students who may be carrying challenges that extend far beyond the classroom. In today's episode, we'll talk about what trauma-informed teaching really means, how educators can recognize trauma in their classrooms, and practical ways teachers can build safe, supportive learning environments for every student. Let's get into the conversation. So I wanted to welcome Dr. Shampoe. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
So for the listeners meeting you for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about your background in education and what led you to focus on trauma-informed work with students and families?
So that's a great question. Well, first and foremost, I was in the military for a long time. And then when I got out of the military, I really didn't know what to do, but I knew that I loved to train soldiers, and a lot of those soldiers were younger people. So when I got out of the military, I thought, hey, I think I'm going to be a teacher. Little did I know there wasn't a lot of pay in teaching, but there is a lot of gratitude. So I taught for many years, but then I realized that the public education system was kind of missing something. And so I didn't really feel like I was a good fit for who I was. And so I went back to school. I got a doctorate degree in alternative education. And I just happened to find this place when I was doing my dissertation. That was called the Next Door. And they did a lot of community service events and things. I knew about that, but I didn't know they ran a residential day treatment that had an educational program. At that time, I wasn't really thinking about really going back into the education field, but when I went in there and I visited and I saw what they were doing, I was like, wait, this makes sense. And so I really learned over the last 8 years that I've been with the Next Door what even trauma-informed teaching was. You know, as educators, they give you a couple of what 2 quarters, 3 quarters maybe of classroom management. They don't really talk about behaviors, but this is how you manage a classroom. And then, but here we were focusing on what behaviors look like and what that really means, and I really got engrossed in that. So I've made it the last 8 years making my mission to talk about what I call the reluctant learner, and trauma-informed classrooms, and really trying to help teachers because it is trying every day to work with kids that have behavioral issues every day, and not knowing how to help them or what to do. So that's really my focus moving forward in my career, is helping teachers and being here for the students to show them that they are beyond their trauma.
You know, trauma-informed teaching feels like one of those buzzwords. It feels like the thing that people talk about, and it's sometimes hard to label. So I'm wondering if we can just start with plain language. You know, here at Collab Ed, I'm trying to make things as simple as I can for teachers, and I'm trying to, work with simplicity.
Sure.
So what does trauma-informed teaching look like in a classroom, in the plainest language you can say it?
First and foremost, it looks like holding boundaries lovingly. So when kids are in trauma, or when they're living, as I call in survival mode, they need the safety of clear expectations and boundaries, but it needs to be okay if they make a mistake. It looks like knowing your students inside and out, knowing what's going on at home, knowing what's happening so your kid can come to you, your student can come to you in the morning and said, I had a really rough night last night. This happened. Um, and we can react. One of the things that a trauma informed educator or classroom looks like is knowing that kids do well if they can, if all their needs are met. So if their physical health is taken care of, if their mental health is taken care of, and their emotional health is taken care of, then the kids will do well if they can, if those needs are met. A lot of times, us educators are put in a really hard spot. We we are asked to basically take care of these kids while parents are working two jobs. We see these kids more than their parents do most of the time. And so we're there taking care of them. And so we need to know our kids. So our role has now not just shifted from educating the kids, but really we're raising these kids until they're 18. And so we need to know our kids inside and out. So basically, predictable routines, calm, regulated adults, clear expectations with flexibility, and relationships before rigor, which means we all know that we got to teach to the state standards, no matter what state you're in. But before a kid is going to learn, especially a kid that has behaviors, we have to have that relationship. Before we're like, rigor, 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 we need to have a relationship with them. So it's building that relationship and bond and then going. It's hard if you're in survival mode to move forward as a kid.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things you just said there may not only describe what a trauma-informed teaching is, but also what the modern-day teacher has been kind of asked to do, more so than I think, any time really, is to know the kids well, is to in some cases act as a parent to these children. And you'll never be a substitute for a parent, but I also think that's the time when you see some of these behaviors come out, and you see some of these behaviors really start to get into a place where a child is showing trauma, right? It's because they're missing something. They want something, right? So many times we're labeling behaviors as defiance or disrespect, but I think sometimes we forget that they can actually be trauma responses.
Yes.
So in your opinion, how should teachers begin to think about these moments differently?
First and foremost is changing your paradigm in your mind, right? Is like, I tell the teachers that I work with every day that a behavior is actually a way a kid is trying to communicate. A kid uses behavior when they lack the skill they need to communicate what's going on. For example, I have a student that is blowing out, crashing out, as the kids would say. The first thing I do is, once I make sure everybody's safe, I bring the kid and I say, how can I help you? What is your body feeling right now? Like, what is your body feeling right now? What's your mind feeling? And I get them to calm down. So basically, I'm sure most of the teachers who have ever been to any type of trauma-informed training or Trauma in the Brain does a great trainings all the time. But like, if this is your brain, right, and this is your brain stem, right, we flip our lid when we get upset. So our prefrontal cortex leaves and we're in our flight or fight mode. So when a kid's upset, you can't ration with them. We're not teaching them at that time. So somehow we have to de-escalate, and we got to get them back in their prefrontal cortex where they can make decisions, where they can where they can stop reacting and then start acting. And so we have to just change that mindset of, oh, this kid is just acting out. This kid's just a bad kid. Mike, I'll tell you, I've really never met a bad kid. I've met a kid in a bad situation. I've met a kid whose parents struggle. I've met kids who come from disparaging surroundings. But normally, kids are not innately bad. So I think we have to reframe that as like, what's going on with the kid? What is this kid trying to communicate to me and not being able to do that? And that's kind of like just reframing student behavior, not as they're a bad kid, but what are they trying to communicate to us?
One of the things you just said to me really resonates with me, and that's this concept of de-escalation. I think that sometimes when we get really frustrated and we're responding to a behavior, we're responding in a way that's actually adding fuel to the fire, right? You said it yourself. There is a time to talk to a child and there is a time not to, right? And sometimes that question about, what can I do for you? How can I help you? It may not even be the right time to ask that question.
That's right.
And it could just be a matter of, let's go take a walk. Let's just sit here. When you're ready, let's talk, right? And I think that that's really important. And I think that that's something that you have to kind of, as a teacher, be open to. You have to be ready to accept that because again, another thing you just said to me that really resonates with me is that it's very hard to find a bad kid.
Yeah.
There are so many different things that happen in the lives of these children nowadays. And I just think of the things that are going on now, where kids are dealing with threats they've never dealt with before. Food insecurity, government programs disappearing, right? This whole issue of deportation, and you don't know what kids are going through at home. And until you do, it's very hard to understand them. One of the other things that we'll move on after this, but one of the other things I try to tell teachers is think about how you are when you're dealing with stress, right? How do you deal with it? What is your attitude when you're hungry? What is your attitude when you're tired? What is your attitude when you're mad? I will look at my kids when I get upset in the classroom and say, you know what? I'll be right back because I need to take myself out of this situation. And trying to model that, because nothing gets fixed by yelling.
Right.
It just doesn't.
100%.
The only thing that gets fixed by yelling is that you've taught the kids now that the only time you want them to listen is when they yell or when you yell. So, yeah, you said a lot of great things there. There's a lot of really great advice in that. So I think one of the things that was especially hard for me as a new teacher, and this is my 11th year in the classroom, is recognizing when a child is in trauma. So in your experience, are there signs or behaviors that teachers might notice that could indicate a student is dealing with trauma?
Yeah. Again, I'm going to go back to a term. I didn't coin it, but I'm going to use it. The reluctant learner. That kid's usually in trauma. So that's the kid that we label as the kid that doesn't really want to be there. Maybe they have their head on the table, on their desk, right? They're not doing their work. They don't want to do their work. They're just kind of laying their head there. They're lethargic, or they're spacing out the window. It could be the class clown that is using humor to deflect. It could be the violent kid. So it is all these things that we have in our classroom. And we just, for years, have said, that's just a bad kid. That kid doesn't want to be here. That kid doesn't really want to learn. I think this is only my opinion, but I think the most toxic place I've ever been in my entire life is probably a teacher lounge in a secondary class. at school. You know what I mean? It's, oh, that kid's so bad. Wait till you get him in your class. That kid's so bad. Wait till you. Oh, you know who his sister is. You know who his brother is, and we just feel this negativity. So it's really hard to get out of that mindset, especially if you're in a small district too. So we have to recognize that these kids that are laying their head down and kind of avoiding work or struggling or whatever, that kid's probably in trauma in some way. Getting to know your kids too, because we don't live back in the days where mom and dads are together all the time. So that nuclear family is not really a thing much anymore, right? And so when kids are in split homes or maybe they're not in split homes, but there's fighting going on, that kid's bringing that anxiety to school. Like you said, Mike, there's food insecurity all over the place now. So if a kid comes to school hungry and not knowing when they're going to eat, or maybe school's the only place they get to eat, man, I couldn't imagine living in that life. And so as educators, we got to go. When I was student teaching, and this was well over a decade ago, one of my fourth graders, the kid came in and just started trashing the place, and he was hangry, for lack of better words. But he was, so I got the chance, even as a student teacher, I had a wonderful mentor teacher then, and she sat down and talked to him. This has got to have been like the third week of school. And basically, we come to find out that he lives with grandma. Grandma takes meds and she sleeps late, and so if he wants to be to school on time, he's got to get himself up and get himself to school. He's not taking his meds, his ADHD and some of his other meds, and he's not getting food. And so we've said, well, we can't help you with your meds yet, but we can call grandma and see if they wanted to leave a prescription with you here, and we can give it to you when you get here. And in my drawer, buddy, every morning, you can just come right to my bottom drawer there. You can grab some food right here, because if you miss breakfast, you can just grab a cereal bar from my thing, and you can eat it quietly at your desk. And then when you're ready to rejoin, you're ready to rejoin. That was my first thing that I've ever seen of trauma-informed teaching. Knowing your student, figuring out what that behavior was, finding a solution with the kid, and then resolving it by saying, you're just hungry? Here you go. Have some food. Eat at your desk. Do we normally allow that? Probably not. But for you, we're going to do that because you have something in your life that's happening, and I want to be here for you, and I want to fix it. Because I think you can do well today if I did that.
There's a lot of good things there, and I think one of the things that I picked up on was you mentioned being in a fourth grade class, and then you mentioned secondary buildings, and I think that trauma has a different face at every grade level. I think that students and families and teachers, they have different thresholds for what a trauma is.
Yeah.
Right? To a kindergartner, a trauma might be something, but it could be something menial. But at the end of the day, it's still trauma to that child, and then you deal with issues that are truly horrific.
Yeah.
And truly traumatizing to anybody. So, recognizing the different types of trauma, I think is important too. And I want to kind of move into, if it's okay, I want to skip something here because I'm looking at one of the topics we had written down. It was creating safe classrooms.
Right.
Right. And I think that, so much can be said about students coming into a classroom and feeling safe, because if you don't feel safe, you can't do anything. So I'm curious if you had any advice. What does a classroom look and feel like when students truly feel emotionally safe and supported?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, your classroom will never be safe if you first, as an educator, can't regulate yourself. If you are coming in heightened, if you are allowing your students to dysregulate you, before you respond to that student, like you said, take five. All of my classrooms have the ability, staff or student can step out into the hallway for 5 minutes to regulate. Do some grounding techniques. Take five. So they know that they can leave the classroom into the hallway, door open, so I can see them, and they can regulate. Whether that is Johnny was frustrating Sally or Timmy, and Timmy's like, I'm getting frustrated. I'm going to take five. I'm going to take a couple deep breaths. I'm going to come in and regulate. So that's first thing. Regulate the adult first. And then it changes in the classrooms that you're at. So if you're in primary school, maybe you have a safe corner where kids can have there's a bean bag and a light and maybe a little tunnel, and they can go and hide out and be a safe corner where they can take five and relax. In a middle school, that's probably not going to work. But in a middle school, maybe there's a safe adult that your kids have, or you have maybe an instructional assistant or paraeducator, depending on what you all call them, that can come in. We do a thing at my school called Solution Focus, where we call in somebody that takes a kid who's maybe not at the blowout stage, but taking five didn't work, they're not regulated yet, and they just take them for a walk, or they take them somewhere away, and they just talk to them like, how can we get you focused back on what you need to be doing? And they just chat with them. Not every school district's going to have enough staff and enough paras to be able to do that.
If I may, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but as you're saying that, what's going through my mind is that there are also ways to kind of adapt this into a classroom too. So if you have a student who you think is about to go over the top, all right, everybody take 2 minutes, talk to your partner about this, right? And the kids are talking, and that can give you, and kids don't really know what 2 minutes is.
Right.
Right? So 2 minutes could be 2 minutes could be 5. Like, it doesn't matter. But that conversation can happen, right? And you're still ensuring that everybody is safe and doing what they need to do. And that may give you a moment to shoulder up next to a kid and say, hey, you all right? What's going on? 100%. What do you need? You know, so I because arguably the first thing that comes up is what you just said, is staffing. We don't have the staffing to do this. Yes. We don't have the staffing to do that. We don't. And so, like, I think it's really important to recognize the things that we can do, right? And that's certainly doable. Yeah. You know, hey guys, instead of working on this independently, I want you to get into groups of 4.
Yeah.
Work with, and then you know what? That gives you time to move around, right? So I like that. And thank you for mentioning.
One of the other things I do, all of my classrooms do, and I've been into some public schools where I've kind of helped with some trauma informed stuff, and this works all the time, and it's a great tool for the teachers and the students once you start to get used to it. I call it community meeting. So basically, we start the morning out, you do announcements, all that stuff, and then before you start teaching your first lesson, you just take a couple seconds with each kid and you say, it's a conversation. So like if you and I are in there together and you're my student, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to say, Mike, how are you feeling today? And you're going to answer, however that is. I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling great. I'm feeling happy. It has to be a feeling word though. Like I'm sad, or I'm excited, or I'm happy it's my birthday. And then what's your goal today, Mike? And you're going to give me a goal for whatever the period is. If it's math, my goal is to get all my work done so I don't have homework. And then who can support you in that goal, right? And then they say, my friend can support me in that goal, or you can support me. And what that does is you're going to see where your kids are at. All the kids are going to see where the kids are at. So if Johnny is, I'm sad today. My dog died, or whatever, right? We can know that when he maybe raises his voice or is short, it's because he's sad. And so then when someone snickers at him if he makes something wrong, or we can go, remember, class, he said his dog died last night. He's sad. So can we give him a little bit of grace? Can we forgive him for that today? And we kind of bring the class into it that way. And also, that they're not attacking you, right? If you have someone in high school, I broke up with my boyfriend, Mr. Williams. I'm pissed off today. Okay, then when you ask her to do something, then she's not snapping at Mr. Williams. She's just mad. She's just mad. And then we're like, okay, I get you. You are mad. And that's okay. But did you take 5? Or do you want to talk about it? At lunch, do you want to stay in and chat with me about it? Or do you want to go see the counselor? There's a lot we can do to regulate it once we know how our kids are feeling. And it's a great way to start the day. Or any meeting, by the way.
You just said something that's so important, and sometimes it's separating the behavior from the child, and figuring out why. And if a student who lashes out at me is a student who has never lashed out at me, they're not talking to me.
Yeah.
Right. And it takes you some time to learn that, but you'll know right away that something's not right. Another thing though that I was really thinking about as you were speaking was this notion of a safe classroom. You had mentioned something about heightened teachers coming in heightened, and you're not starting out the right way. It's the same way for students.
Yes.
Right? So if a student walks into a classroom and the first thing they're thinking is that this teacher doesn't like me, that classroom's not a safe place for them. Right? And I do the best that I can on a daily basis to walk out of my building and walk back in the next day with my students and say, you know what? It's a new day. What you did yesterday, unless it was something very serious, and but if you aggravated me yesterday, fine. Like, we're moving on. You get another chance today. And all of that, I think, goes into creating that safe space. Yeah. But you said something about like community meetings, right? What you're doing is you're creating a classroom culture. You're creating a place that kids want to come to, and I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And yeah, really good stuff.
I think, Mike, not to interrupt you, but one of the other things that we do, it's very important. The beginning of the year, is so important it doesn't matter if you're teaching high school calculus or you're teaching kindergarten. It doesn't matter. I tell my teachers that this is a community of learners. We're a community together. We're going to learn together. And so I always ask every period, first couple days of school, I say, what does it look like for you to learn? I ask each kid that. We talk about it. It's a discussion. I don't care if we get nothing done in a period, but talk about for the first couple of days, like, what does it look like for you to learn? How does that? Some kids will say, I need my music to learn. I need my headphones in. I need to walk around. They'll tell you what feels safe for them. And then we're like, okay, so here's our school rules. How can we fit this into our rules so you feel safe and you feel like you're able to learn? And we build we allow the kids and the adults in the room to build a structure that's safe for everyone. Some people are like, I don't like it when people yell. Okay, so we're gonna use our inside voices, even if we're angry. But is it okay if we fail a couple times? Yeah, because fail is the first attempt in learning, right? So it's okay. It's okay if your kids fail. Another thing that I want teachers to know, if they don't take anything from this, and it's really hard for us teachers, is if you have a kid that has a lot of behaviors and you have a kid that's not, because of their behaviors or their circumstances or their trauma, and they're not getting to where you think they should be, or um, their success is not defined on how well you are as a teacher. I want to say that again. Their success and their movement and their behaviors are not they do not define your ability to teach. They don't define you as a person. And you got to kind of take a step back. Like, I'm doing my best every day to help this kid. And this kid might have a lot of trauma that is 17 years in the making. You're not going to fix that in one trimester. But so it's not on you. It's not how well you are of a teacher. And your teacher reviews and your principal reviews should not be based on how one or two students' trauma is affecting your classroom. Does that make sense?
You know what it does, and something that I try to tell people and remind people is if you're going to take credit for the bad, take credit for the good.
Yes.
Because you know what? There's 19 students in your class who worship the floor you work on or you walk on. So you know what? Like, you have to, and that's sometimes like when somebody goes straight into something negative. Oh, I can't get this child to behave. I can't do this. Take a step back and look at what you are doing, you know, and let's take what we're doing. Let's give ourselves credit for it because you are doing these things. And then let's talk about alternate strategies that we can use with these children.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. You know, like, I mean, I'd hope that we're not in a situation where people are being evaluated on the performance of two students, but you know, I don't know that it's something that isn't happening.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's a big nation. You know, we talk a lot about building trust as something that makes you a great educator, and there's an unfortunate part to this conversation, and the unfortunate part becomes that sometimes students just don't simply trust adults because they've had a bad experience with adults.
Yeah.
Right? Students don't trust a male because they've had a bad experience with a male, a female, right? So I'm wondering if you have any advice for teachers who may struggle, or how to deal with kids who may struggle to trust adults because of past experiences.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is trust is built in small moments, not big speeches, right? So first and foremost, always do not say that you're going to do something if you can't do it, right? Always do what you're going to say. And then stay consistent. Even if the youth is struggling, stay consistent. And then the next day, if you have a student that's blowing out, stay consistent. Hold those boundaries. Hold those rules. Even if you have to send them to the administrator, that's fine. But the next morning when they come in, you want to make sure that when they come in, you greet them by name. I'm glad you're here. You're awesome. Thank you for coming here. I know we had our struggles. Do you want to talk about that at another time? But I am so glad that you're here today. And you do that every day. And sometimes it's hard as educators. So one of the things that I learned when I was in sales way back when is, I don't know if you might not be old enough to remember telemarketing, but I was a telemarketer. And one of the things they said was smile when you dial. When you smile, your voice tones go up and you don't sound like a bad person. Same when you're talking to a kid, smile a little bit the next day and smile and say, I'm really glad you're here. Even if you're like, oh my gosh, I hope today is not going to be that day again. But I found that most kids that are in trauma have had an adult in their life give up on them, or somebody in their life has given up on them. We can't be those people that are giving up. You got to be there every day, and no matter how hard they are, you got to shake it off and say, I'm glad you're here. and that's how that you build that trust. And we just can't just give up on them when they test us, right? We gotta have the resolve and the fortitude to be like, I know you're hurting, but guess what? I'm gonna be right here for you when you're tomorrow. I'm here for you.
I think that honesty and that vulnerability is important too. You know, hey, today was a rough day, but we'll go at it again tomorrow.
That's right.
You know that I think your actions speak really loud in a situation like that, because, as you said, this child has somebody's done this child wrong, and let this child down, and words may not be enough, right?
Yeah.
But actions are, and I think that's when the trust starts to change a little bit. So I'm just a question that I have that is not necessarily, well, maybe it is. Um, Giving your work recruiting foster parents, and support treatment services, what should teachers understand about students living in foster care or unstable environments?
Um, well, let's start with the unstable environments because I think we have a really bad system to get kids into um, foster care. So I don't always think that the system works as fastly as it should sometimes. But if they're in an unstable home, um, if there is abuse or if there is alcoholism or drug abuse, these kids are living in what I call survival mode. They're coming to school in survival mode. They are heightened at the level that you haven't seen. In mental health, we talk about our window of tolerance being a window. Some days our window is fully open and we can allow a lot of things go in and out of our window. But when a kid that is in survival mode, that window is shut. It's nailed shut. It's cocked. You're never getting that window open. So they're going to be heightened at all times. So it doesn't matter what you say. They're going to be in a defensive mode because they feel like everybody's out to get them, and they just got to fight, fight, fight. So in unstable homes, you're going to see that. That's where you're going to see a lot of your food insecurities. You're going to see a lot of, I'm going to push you away because I want to be the one that breaks off this relationship, not you, because everybody else walks away. Nobody likes me. So we see a lot of reactive attachment disorders. You see a lot of ODD students doing this. They want to. A lot of times, kids have ODD because they're in survival mode all the time. So they're just defiance all the time. So, yeah. So that's what it is. When they're in foster homes, we have to look at why. Why are they in a foster home, right? We have to just, are they in a foster home because both of their parents died? Well, that's traumatic, right? Are they in there because their parents are in jail? Are they in there for abuse? Whatever reason, they've had trauma there. Now they're living in a stranger's home. And who knows how long they're going to live there. There's no stability for these kids. So they don't know. The only thing that ever is stable or consistent is they have to get up in the morning and go to school. And they know that they're always going to go to Mr. Williams' classroom every day. You might be the only consistent thing that's going to be in their life this year. And so we just have to understand that. How do we feel when we feel like nobody wants us? How do we feel when we have that loss in our life? And we're in our 40s, we're in our 30s. We have decades of skills that we've learned, and these kids don't have the skills. And so they're going to act out just a little bit more because they don't know how to process that. Again, behavior is just a way of communicating a skill that they don't have.
Interesting. That's interesting, and it's a good reminder sometimes that, I think that as teachers, we expect students to know things that they don't know, and our expectation sometimes puts us in a weird spot with stuff like that. I want to shift this conversation a little bit for a couple of minutes onto actual teachers. So, in a building where there is a lot of trauma, I realize that going to work every day can be heavy. It can be emotionally heavy. So, how can teachers care for their own well-being while still supporting their students? And what's something that you, as an administrator, tell the teachers who work for you to do in order to kind of care for themselves?
That's a great question. First and foremost, if there's administrators listening, take care of your teachers. They're in the trenches. They have a hard job. It's got harder since COVID. When we came back into the classroom, it's hard. So administrators, your only job is to care for your teachers so they can care for these kids. End of story. So as an administrator, I didn't learn as a teacher this word until I started working at the next door. It's called self-care. Self-care. Take care of yourself. What does that mean? So for my teachers, I make sure that that they feel like they're supported. If they need a break, they know that they can call me in the office and I'm going to come down and I can cover their classroom. I don't care if it's for a period. I don't care if it's for 2 periods. If they are feeling that they need time to relax during the day, then they can take that time, and I'm going to cover their classroom for them as an administrator. There is no other task that I need to do. I don't care if I'm dealing with the state. As an administrator, my teacher is the most important person because they're doing the hard job. So there's that. And I want teachers to know it's okay to take time off. Relinquish a little bit of control of your classroom. Take that time off. If you're going through something, do that. If you need help and you don't know, most schools have an employee assistance program where you can call on the phone. Mental health is not a bad thing. That's not a bad word. I know that I have directed some of my school guidance counselors that have that to help some of my teachers. If you need a moment, go talk to the guidance counselors. Take care of that. I also plan, no, I take credit. I have a committee that plans. It's called a Spirit Committee, and they do things. Like we have staff lunches where we have like potlucks, and we bring everybody together, and we try to make it so everybody breaks at the same time so they can come have some sort of food, and we have the para-educators kind of take control for a little bit. But we want to make sure that they're doing that. So just doing things. It's amazing to me how you can turn someone's really bad day around by saying, you know what, I really appreciate you, and oh my gosh, look at what you're doing. You and I make a really great team. Just little things as administrators. And for teachers, go home, take a hot shower, and shower off the day. Shower off that trauma. There's a really big thing called vicarious trauma. When you have kids that are having a lot of behaviors or have a lot of trauma, we want to, as humans, have that relationship with them and take that pain from them. And we do that as educators. We take on their trauma. We try to take as much as we can. But especially if you're in secondary school and you're seeing 25 kids a period, 7 classrooms, you're looking at like 350 kids, you can't take on that much trauma. You got to go home and wash it off. And you need to tell your administrators what you need. What do you need? Do you need more tools in your classroom? Do you need... a lot of schools are going and doing a retreat. I take my staff every summer. Right before school starts, we do a retreat where we're gone for 3 days. And we go and we do a retreat. We do a little bit of what are we going to do next year, and a lot of team building and a lot of how are you feeling? How can I help you? How can I support you? So that's kind of what I do with my staff.
You know, you said a lot there, and there's a lot of things that we can do. But I wanna pick up on one of the points that you made, and that's we can't always wear the trauma for the kids,
Yeah.
right? We can't weather the storm for them because they're only within our purview for a certain amount of time. So I'm curious if you've ever really been around educators who who make mistakes when they're trying to support students experiencing trauma. Do you ever see people who are taking on too much? Do you ever see people who are not dealing with it in the best way? What are some of the most common mistakes teachers make?
The most common mistake I think that teachers are making is just thinking it's okay to suck up this trauma. I'm stronger. I'm bigger. I can carry that weight. And you can carry that weight for a little bit of time, but you can't carry it forever. Um, it's not asking for help when you need it. Um, a lot of teachers think that this is my classroom. If I can't manage the emotions and the behaviors going in here, that makes me look like I have no classroom management. But asking for a little bit of help is okay. That's a strategy and a skill. Um, but I can give you an example. Today was a really hard day, and we had a kid blow out really, really hard. Um, and I tomorrow starts spring break for some of our kids in one of my schools, and I said normally we have a development day, and I said I don't want you guys to come back tomorrow. They're like, no, we got so much to do. We got so no. I want you to take tomorrow. I want you to process what happened with me right now, and at the end of this day, when I have to leave, I want you to go home and I want you to be with your family. I don't want you to think about this place until you come back. I want you to leave it. I want you to have 10 days of refreshingness, and I want you to come back and I want you to be refreshed and know that anything that we need to process, we'll process when you get back. But I want you to take time because you need to get this, we need to let this day go. And so that's how I help my staff. Um, I'm a big guy on crying. I think it's okay to cry. Please cry, let it out. Everybody should cry at least once in their life. And so it's okay to cry around me. My staff knows that, and let it out. You hold that in, and it's like you hold it in. It's like a fester. It's like a boil, um, and we want to release that. So we're not feeling that pain, and we're not agitated and giving that pain back to our students.
You know, really, this is the reason why part of me went and started Collab Ed was, I think about teachers who listen to this, and when I ask the question, what are some of the mistakes that are made? I'm not asking that question to pass blame onto people. What I'm asking it for is because I want people to understand that teachers are some of the best people out there, and they need some of the support. And it kills me to go on to LinkedIn and see all these people trying to get people out of teaching, and because the people that go into teaching have a big heart,
Yeah.
and they want to help kids, and I guess the point of me asking a question like that was just to make sure that they're balancing and you're balancing, because we need you for the long run.
Yeah.
I'm 43. I have two 6-year-old boys who are in first grade. They're going to need great teachers. And at the rate we're going, I, our computer's going to be teaching my kids by the time they get to high school. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
it's tough, but I really, I am so passionate about keeping people in this profession. Sounds like you were some sort of a career changer, semi-career changer, or just listening to you say you were in sales? I worked 12 years, 14 years in the retail world. So I'm a career changer too. And, it's still a great job, and good people need to do it. So, yeah, I felt like I needed to clarify that for anybody who's listening. You're not making mistakes. We just don't want you to carry yourself out of this field because we need
100%. And
you.
I think that
Yeah.
also, I think that the biggest mistake any teacher can ever make, I guess, is walking away from the profession that you love. Don't do that. The kids need you. You would not have become a teacher or an educator if you didn't love kids and if you didn't want to make this world a better place. Some of the best people I know are educators, just like you said. Um, but all of the humans I know have been educated by an awesome teacher. I can still remember my high school math teacher's phone number, right? We all have these teachers that make a difference in our life and they shape who we become. And what sucks about teaching sometimes is you don't always get to see the full circle. What you've done to change or influence the life of one of your students. Maybe you'll meet them down the road 10 or 15 years later to be like, Mr. Williams, I can't believe it. You don't know what a big difference you made in my life. It was because of you that I'm still here. I'm happy. I'm with this guy. I got the job that I have now, and that hopefully when you get those as educators, and you will, that refuels whatever is empty inside of you in that moment, and just gives you that passion to teach again. One of the things that we also do in the middle of the year and at the end of the year is I make my teachers. I know this is a buzzword, and don't shut the camera off, but remembering your why. Like, why did you get there? And I make my teachers close their eyes and say, remember when you got out of school, out of teaching school, and you graduated, and you're going to your first interview and you're nervous. Remember that. Like, why did you want to teach? What was that? What was that? And I want you to feel that for the next 3 months or 4 months, because that's what we need to see. Whatever that is, you want to teach the next president, do it. What you want to change the world, do it. Because we still have the ability to do that. Doesn't matter if you've been teaching for 20 years.
All right. So I want to rapid fire 2 questions
Got
to
you.
finish this thing off.
Let's do it.
Ready? What is one thing you wish every educator understood about students who are experiencing trauma?
They're not bad. They're not. Their behaviors are not because they dislike you. Their behaviors are not. They should not be defined by their behavior. Do not define them by their behavior. First and foremost, they're a student. Second and foremost, they're human.
Yeah. Child.
Child, yes.
I mean, you will spend most of your life teaching a child, and no matter whether that child acts like they're 16 or acts like they're 24, they're still a child. And that's important to remember. And sort of like in closing, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a student who's experienced trauma. If they could say one thing to their teachers about what they need most, what do you think it would be?
Don't give up on me when I make it hard for you to like me.
I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking about the power in this conversation that we've had tonight. I mean, I don't know about you, but I probably could go another 2 hours just talking
100%.
about everything here. The fact that we're almost at an hour already is pretty wild. But Dr. Shampoe, I want to thank you very much for being here. You know, when I found you on LinkedIn, I knew nothing about you. I knew nothing about anything that you've done in your career yet. Looking through your posts on LinkedIn and looking through the stuff you had put out there, I knew that what we were going to get from a conversation with you was some real stuff. And I know that sometimes listening to two people talk about something in a way, it almost makes it sound easier than it is, but just know that we've both been there. We've both been in the trenches, and we understand just how hard this is. And so that's why hopefully in the last hour you've gained some insight on how to work with our students who are experiencing trauma, whether it be a broken nail or whether it be the loss of a parent. Trauma is trauma, and it affects your children, and it changes who they are, because I think in a way it changes who we are.
Yes.
When I hear the word trauma, I think the first thing I think of is when I lost my father, and I wasn't right after that, and it makes me think I was just over 40, and I still had no idea how to deal with it. Having the skills that I had, having the skills that you mentioned before. So, Dr. Shampoe, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time. And folks, when we post this, I will also leave the contact information for Dr. Shampoe, so you could follow him and get some things and get some advice online and on LinkedIn. Well, thank you for your time. It was really great meeting you.
Michael, it was great meeting you in person. Thank you.
Thank you, and be well. All right. Until our next episode, thank you very much. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.